What's blocking the adoption of AI in medtech? Well, hey, all my big brain medtech nerds. I saw a recent chat between Joe Mullins and Santosh Iyer where they were discussing where AI fits within medtech, which is a highly regulated industry. And as a systems engineer who's progressed surgical robotics, as well as someone who's implemented different AI solutions in harmonic technology for Ethicon, I wanted to take a couple moments to break down the landscape of artificial intelligence, systems requirements, risks, and how you can actually have these conversations with regulatory bodies to implement new solutions that progress the care for patients, which is exciting. So we're going to watch a quick 1-minute clip from Santosh, and then we're going to go through traditional AI through a harmonic case study that I worked on. And then I'm going to go through a fun generative AI case study from a member of my community on Skool who does AI content creation to kind of help you understand the difference between traditional neural networks and what's going on with generative. And then we'll go through some regulatory risk management with FMEAs, which I navigated extensively within the Ethicon, Oris, Verb days when I worked at Johnson & Johnson. And then we'll go through traditional and generative AI risks and the path forward. And this is just a lovely picture of what a neural network looks like. It's just math. So let's watch the clip. I'm going to try to keep this under 15 minutes because LinkedIn likes that. So let's jump in.
But there's also a player, an actor in our industry that is not present in other industries, and that's the FDA. And the FDA doesn't like black boxes. And so what does that mean to the acceleration of AI in our health tech, med tech industry, given the black box that does seem to exist with it?
I think it really boils down to two things. It's really about intimately understanding risk at a completely different level. It's a new language of risk. It's not with materials and plastics. It's about data. And the second is education. So I think bringing the FDA along the way, right? So fortunately, I think in medical, there's a lot of non-AI predicates for many of the things that we're applying AI to. And FDA understands that. So I think if you can start from that place where there's a common language of understanding of risk in a non-AI context, you need to bring them along, right? So I think it's as much understanding internal risk and how you're going to bring these products, as well as working with the FDA to educate them on what your business is using with that tool. And I think transparency is key here, because if I were a regulator, my gut reaction is to say no. And if you want them to say yes, you need to bring them along, right? And there's a lot of pathways that are available today where the FDA wants to work with you, and I think transparency pays off.
Beautiful. All right, let me make that tiny for a second. So one of the things I want to focus in on here is this transparency. And then Santosh also discussed this idea of like using, I'll say like a familiar frame. And this would be looking at risks and helping them understand it. And going back to, he also talks about, I don't know if it was in this clip or later, the idea of moving back to like first principles. So before we jump into that, oh my God, my spelling, such an engineer, first principles. So before we jump into that, I want to go through this case study again of what traditional AI looks like. And this is the black box that he's talking about. So when you're tuning a neural network, you have a series of input nodes or signals you could be looking at. And then you can give them a different weight in this hidden layer. Like there's interactions occurring and you can weigh them and build relationships between them so that when you measure the output, you can kind of predict an output. Oh, 1 second. Let me pause. Make sure my baby's okay. Thanks for the flexibility. There was a mini toddler baby brawl. I think they're good, but we'll see. And I tripped over my words a little bit. Basically, you can build a relationship by measuring an output based on inputs consistently. And then when you see certain outputs, why am I tripping over my words? Whatever, I don't have to be perfect. Let's just go through the case study. It'll make sense. All right, so let me draw something fun for you. It's still early in the morning. This is my favorite device. Okay, this is, I'm not drawing it perfectly, but this is a harmonic blade, and we have these nice little piezoelectronic discs. Piezos, and we're going to oscillate these around 50,000 cycles per second, kilohertz. And this creates this beautiful standing wave down the blade. And then that wave will bounce back perfectly. You have these nice nodes here. and we can get this blade to move quickly. When you close tissue on the blade, it creates immense amounts of friction and heat that causes the water to evaporate, the proteins cross and get sticky, and allows us to seal and cut at the same time. This is like one of my favorite technologies that J&J has deployed. I've worked on it on a wide range of handheld applications and other. And what I want to discuss, one of the algorithms I worked on with this, is there's a lot going on here. We have, I'll just say multiple electronic, I'll just say electro signals that we could look at. You have power, you have impedance on the system or resistance. You have factors of time associated with, like, we put something in here, some kind of tissue. We don't know how thick it is or how thin it is. And we close a clamp arm on it. And what we're curious on predicting is, when have we completed the transection? And this is something that we've launched called ATT, or Adaptive Tissue Technology. But we use AI to detect when this tissue has been transected. And we're looking at multiple electronic signals going through the blade. We're looking at time. We're looking at some other novel, I can't divulge exactly how we do it, but those trained in the art can figure it out. And the way that we do this, and again, I won't explain everything here, is we're going to take large samples. The child is coming. We'll see how this goes. Samples of various tissue, which I won't disclose. Oh my gosh, give me one more second. He wants water. Okay, I'm back again. This is so fun. So we're going to look at large samples of various tissues. And then what we're going to do is cut the tissue while measuring. Input is going to be all of the, like, electro and time. But the other thing we're also going to measure is visually. I'll say, and I'll have to be careful with this, percentage of tissue transection. There's different ways to do it. And it matters. There's a lot of art and science that mean here. Transection. And then you have users in the loop determine when tissue transection is complete. And how you define this is also nuanced. And then you can then find a relationship between inputs and desired output, which is the transection output. And then alert. And this creates, like, we'll say a trigger. Alert clinician. So I have this embedded in my subconscious. When you are firing a harmonic device and you're closing and you click that you want to do advanced hemostasis and, like, seal a vessel, it'll go bup 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 bup. The bup 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 is triggered. It's an ATT tone. It is triggered when the inputs have reached a level of confidence mathematically that you've completed transection. The reason this is so important is if you continue to just stay closed and activating even though the transection is complete, you're going to get this titanium blade on a Teflon pad. Eventually you'll melt through the pad, and then from there you'll actually have metal on metal contact, which will lead to broken blades. There's different risks associated with this. It's a lot of work and a lot of fun. So anyway, this is like traditional AI, and this is in a product that's commercialized. It's in multiple products, actually, and we've adapted that algorithm over time. So what is generative AI? So this is, and I'm looking at my notes to the side, with a traditional, I'm cheating a little bit, because I'm still learning, friends. I'm not an expert in generative. I'm leaning into generative. Like with traditional neural networks, you're trying to map inputs to predictive outputs. With generative, AI, you the this is so complicated. Like it learns, I'm going to write this directly, underlying probability distributions of the training data, and then it generates like new data points. So it creates novel outputs. It's not necessarily perfectly mapping a predicted output. It generates. So let's just show an example of like what you could do with generative AI. So this is a guy in our community, Barnabas. So I have a community in Skool. There's like almost 200 folks here building the life they desire. It's fun, cool, and different. And I did a post on like, what languages do you speak, just to get people chatting in different languages. And Barnabas has a community for AI content creation. He's fantastic. So this is the language he speaks.
I speak the Queen's English and occasionally other versions of English too.
What I love about this, and I did a reaction video, is he sent a Loom video just to kind of unpack it a little bit. I want you to listen to this as well.
Thank you for your reaction video. It made me laugh just
Back
for a
here.
much deeper and totally different voice than I have, but I like it, and it's just made with VO3, so the voice comes out different every time. You can prompt the voice to be different, like very English or American or however you want it to be. It doesn't always obey the prompt. But yes, it's getting so good. AI.
It doesn't always obey the prompt. That was the insight I had right here. It doesn't always obey the prompt. You can get different outputs than what you expect. When you listen to Sam Altman talk about OpenAI, when he's talking about the success from ChatGPT 4 to 5, it's the reduction in hallucinations of AI. And this is why there's fear from the FDA going all the way back to Santosh. If you want to create a generative AI system that will monitor all of your generator inputs and a robotic surgical system that's actively deployed on a patient, and you give it a mission of like, hey, here's this patient with all these pre-existing health conditions, here's his vitals, take out a quarter, do a wedge resection on his lung, go. That's what humans do. They take all the inputs and they land towards an output the best they can based on what they know clinically and what they've been trained to do, and then they improvise based on running into different things in the circumstance. When an AI is doing it as a commercialized product and you have governance over it from the FDA, having a lack of obeying of the prompt or taking out maybe a different section of the lung that wasn't in scope from that surgery, that's where things get really terrifying and concerned, and that's where you have a lot of restrictions. So let's go back to our notes and we could unpack this a bit more. I'll move my head over a little bit. So let's go back to the start, and hopefully this is exciting, friends. We're gonna go past 15 minutes. It's okay. So that was traditional AI on Harmonic 1100 is one of the devices that has ATT. Then generative AI, we have content creation where you could land in different unexpected spaces. And when you put that inside of someone's body, that gets scary. And again, transparency. I've never developed any generative AI algorithms. I've done traditional neural networks and medical devices. I'm still learning into these spaces. So I'm always transparent as an engineer, what I do and don't know, or what I'm currently learning into. Generative is a space I'm learning into. But what I do know is risks and systems. So one of the challenges is that we have a lot of regulatory risks. And the way we manage risks, for those of you who haven't commercialized products, is through the design history file, there's something called FMEAs. So I'm going to break down like what an FMEA is for dummies, because not everybody interacts with these documents. And I've interacted with far more of them than I ever desired. And I have learned a lot about the process. And then we'll talk about some of the implications to traditional and generative AI. So, and again, I'm just winging it, friends, and I might be rusty on this slightly. So an F, MEA, because we love acronyms, MEA is a failure modes effects analysis. So what you want to understand is like, what could go wrong? The modes that it could go wrong. Improvising through this a little bit, go wrong. And then the impact to patient typically, but there's also other impacts, patients. And then calculating risk. So let's do an example. Let's go back to that harmonic device, right? Because that harmonic device is governed by multiple FMEAs. So if you could put different letters in front of this. So if we were doing a DFMEA, that would be a design failure modes effects analysis. You could do an S for software, or sometimes people do SW, software failure modes effects analysis. You could do U for user failure modes effects analysis. So looking at how the user is misinformed, makes a mistake, and what that impact is to the patient. There's also S for like systems failure modes effects analysis. I've worked across many. Let's talk through the harmonic one. Or let's do a robotics application of a vessel sealer. We'll just keep that more generalized. So you might have a risk. So let's say a failure, sorry. I gotta be careful with my words. And these are normally giant spreadsheets, or you can track them in different platforms like Jira or JAMA. Forget which one. I think they're the same thing. I gotta double check that. I've been in entrepreneurship for a year. I haven't touched an FMEA in like 3, so give me some grace. So failure would be inadequate closure force during sealing of a vessel. And I'm keeping the technology ambiguous in this space, but pretend you have some kind of device that can deliver energy in some capacity. You put something inside of it, you want to seal it so it cooks it on both sides and doesn't let blood come through it, and you had inadequate closure force, so you were slightly open when you did that, and that can have effects on the electromechanical interactions with the tissue, which could lead to a poor seal. So this is the failure. You didn't do that correctly. If you were looking at I'm going to skip notes, but if you're looking at the effect of this, you would basically have like lack of hemostasis, and then there could be different levels of this even, which could lead all the way to like patient death. This would be like a more critical failure. And then you would have rankings on severity. And then this one would be like very high severity. You would also have rankings on probability. Let's say that you have really great consistency in your motor control. This is really low probability. Low prob. And then you would basically make a map of severity and probability, and this determines like a risk map. So let me draw what that can look like. So you could have, this is going deep. I only got a couple more minutes before I got to go drop off my kid at preschool. So we have severity, risk. We're going to get to regulatory and AI. I promise we'll circle back, but I think it's worth unpacking this a little bit. Sorry, severity, and then we have probability up top. Probability. And then this whole thing is going to be kind of your risk profile. So we'll break it into some nice squares. Normally there's a key in your organization. So this would be like low, this would be moderate, and then this would be high. Again, these are all relative, very high. There's probably, the FDA probably has guidance on this, very, very high. I'm making all this up for example right now, okay? But basically, if you as you move in this direction, things get really bad. And what you need to do is have an increase in risk mitigations. And this is going to circle back to first principles and how you actually move forward with generative AI. Like if you think about a fully autonomous knee surgery or fully autonomous liver transplant, or like things you could start to move towards in the realm of sci-fi that's becoming reality in our industry, it's all about risk mitigation. And when you have generative AI that could land on these different outputs, how do you bound those systems? That's what we have to figure out. So with risk mitigations, you might have system level requirements. So you could look at like the system shall output. Now we're going to make up like some arbitrary number, 3.26. This is not the real number. For people freak out, don't use this number, newtons of closure force. Force plus or minus some confidence interval, we'll say 0.6 newtons, with I'm not a statistician, 90% confidence. So all of this is like your quality engineer, your systems engineers, your design engineers all have to work together to understand what are these numbers. When we first started doing robotics between Ethicon and Verb Surgical, this is where like a meat of conversations where I'm like, what are these numbers? What's a TBD? What's a TBC? How do you make sure these are clinically relevant, that they're burning the risk down? What's the guidance from your risk that informs how stringent the requirement needs to be? Do you need to test it at the full system level, end to end? Can you test it in components, like just the instruments, just the hardware, just the software? So these risks cascade and thread down into smaller smaller requirements based on how severe the risks are. If it's low risk, you don't need mitigation. And that's great because that frees up your design space. You can have more tolerance and variation without any risk to the patient. So all of this said, going back to our original case study, the problem we're trying to solve here. Did I lose my way? Right. This is regulatory risk management. You have FMEAs. This is the language that the FDA is used to speaking when they get a design history file with a submission for various. Thanks, Akio. Various technology. You found the guitar. The reality is, like with traditional and neural networks, as well as generative AI, the outputs that you aspire to are the same. Like you want your device to consistently cut through tissue. Or once you get into end-to-end procedural automation, you want to make sure that it can detect the right tissue. It can understand where on that tissue it should transect. It can transect reliably and repeatably. And whether it's using a traditional neural network or generative AI, as long as you have requirements that the system won't cut this far down or this high up, or make these decisions, and you have it through an FMEA and then through risk mitigations like requirements, and then you test and improve it, you can launch products that leverage generative AI. You just have to bring the FDA along in these discussions. Again, I have never personally done that with a generative AI solution, but the outputs that you're looking at is the tissue and the patient. It's just how you're informing technology to interact with the tissue and the patient, and where you bound or constrain that behavior so it's operating within safe limits. We're not going to go from no automation to fully AI autonomous, unbounded, and just trust people's bodies under that system. We have to ladder up to it step by step, sequence by sequence, and demonstrate it at different levels before you go from not like manual from a clinician to semi-autonomous to fully autonomous. Like look at planes, right? Like they fly themselves in some capacity, but there's still a pilot at the wheel that can make decisions alongside the system as necessary. Surgery will move towards that as well. So the path forward to Echo is just transparency. And everybody, his spelling is atrocious today. Everybody has to just navigate this incrementally with the science and data and experiment and take these risks and inform each other day by day on how it's going. And eventually you'll see some really cool tech out there. So I'm excited for where surgery is going. I think it's neat. Once you have the hardware positioned and you have the smarts from a software perspective and the right regulatory and testing strategies, it really is kind of unlimited where you can go in these spaces. My days during Ottava, the goal is get a robot out. And then once you have the robot as an asset, there's so much more you can do with it. So I'm excited for the seasons of so much more, and keep changing the world. If you need help, reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, and I have a community on Skool, which is super cool. And if you like this deep dive thing and you found it insightful, casual, and helpful, let me know. So here's your confetti. Go heal some people. I'll see you on the next one.